Hey everyone, Whoopie Boy back with a late night video. Today we're gonna dive a little bit more into my my business, where my business has started, where it's evolved to where it is today, um, and then talk a little bit more about what my current business model is, how I'm approaching 2026, just to give you a better feel for where I'm starting, this journey towards full-time Pokemon, and kind of what I have to work with, the numbers that I'm working with, and uh, things of that nature. So before we dive into fun numbers and business models, a couple caveats. Nothing that I say is financial advice, tax advice. I'm not a financial advisor. Um, you know, pretty straightforward. I will share some high level revenue and profit figures from my business. Those are estimates. They're not um, a, exact figures. So just take them as they are. And as I talk about, and for this video and for future videos, as I talk about plays that my business is making, strategies, things that I'm thinking about, feel free to copy them, but just make sure that you're going into it eyes wide open. You're not spending a lot of money on cards just because I'm also doing it. Hopefully is pretty straightforward, but just need to get that out of the way. So with that, kind of jumping into some hard numbers, a little bit more about the business, how 2023 and 2024 really set the foundation for where I am today. So as I mentioned in my first video, started the Pokemon business in January of 2023. Was in the hobby prior to that, but was not really taking it seriously as a business. Was kind of collecting, messing around, having fun, and running the the business is also fun. But um, started really taking it seriously January 2023. $5,000 seed capital. Started where I think a lot of people start. Just started trying to search for raw, near mint, and conditions of any quality singles anywhere I could. eBay was my primary selling platform. Started to do daily, weekly listings. Started to understand how to price things. Scoured eBay auctions for collections, for lots, and did all the math to understand what's the maximum price I can pay to get X margin. Um, in 23, I had the maximum amount of time that I could allocate to the business, and kind of the least amount of knowledge and the least amount of capital. So, you know, leverage that to kind of grind small margins here and there. Made a lot of mistakes, took a lot of losses, but just focused on learning. um, did not jump into the business with the goal of going full time by any means. At this time, it was just a something fun that made some money. Wanted to learn what I could, see where it goes. So you can see full year P&L figures off of a $5,000 bankroll, made around $20,000 in revenue and around $1,800, $1,700 in profit. So 9% margin is not anything to write home about, but was able to turn over my my total bankroll 4x. So 20K revenue, 5K bankroll. I was able to fully purchase inventory, 5K worth of inventory, and then, sell it around once every 3 months. Yeah, so good foundational year. 2024 was a similar kind of model, but the knowledge really started to compound for me, and the inventory started to grow pretty well for me, and really started to both improve the amount of listings that were on the eBay store. Feedback started to get to a point where I feel like I was getting more return customers. I optimized the shipping, the listing, the organizing of inventory. I started to learn what sold, what was dead inventory, things of that nature, and started to embrace grading more. In 23, I kind of graded 20-ish cards a month with PSA, which was all that my limited bankroll could really afford. I didn't want to send so many cards that I had to then withhold a bunch of capital to pay future grading fees. So I had to start really small and slowly build my way up, but saw good results. And it was a booming market. So, a lot of these plays probably worked, even though they probably weren't, big brain genius plays. But I, like most other businesses in the space, a rising tide lifts all boats. And as the cash flow started to grow, I was able to focus more on grading. So 20 cards a month turned into 30 cards a month, turned into 20 cards every 2 weeks, turned into, by the end of 24, I was at about 100 cards a month going to PSA. And at the time, turnaround times weren't that bad. This was all bulk, and I was getting cards back in 3, 4, 5 months, and was better able to understand how to pre-grade what cards had positive EV to send, were worth sending, what cards were better just to continue to pump through the eBay store. But so, full year results for 24, 60K ish of revenue, around 11.5K of profit. So pretty solid growth. I mean, tripled revenue and almost 10x, not 10x, 5 to 7x profit, and then margins doubled, which I think is all can be attributed to the amount of grading that I was doing. Grading is just, at the time, was just such a high margin, high value approach relative to churning raw. I could get a modern near mint single and grind it for $1, $5 here or there, buying 90% of market, selling at 105% of market, getting 2 to 5% in actual net profit. Or I could send it to PSA, it gets a 10, and I'm 10xing my money. So as long as the grading premiums were so high, it just made sense to allocate every incremental additional dollar of cash flow towards the grading engine. And so that's what I did. So 2025 is what I consider to be my breakout year. 24, again, $11,000 of profit is good, but it's not anywhere close to a business that can support a full-time job, a family, etc. And at that point, I also was not thinking that it would. It was just again, like an interesting side hustle that was starting to grow and be interesting. 2025 is where the PSA Vault became a huge part of my business. So PSA Vault launched in like mid to late 2024, and I was watching the updates, you know, as the eBay Vault became the PSA Vault, and they started to roll it out, across their full customer base. And I I played around here and there with sending submissions to the vault. Like first, it was all my PSA nines. I didn't want to wait to get them back in the mail to then have to list them on my store, auction them, to have to deal with all the labor for a loss. So I would just send them all to the vault, and it was a really good experience having PSA handle all of the work of, you know, doing most of the listing work, the shipping, customer service, and then I would get paid when the payment cleared. So that's what really opened my eyes to the power of consignment services. Z&G, PSA Vault, DC Sports. There are so many different ones, and I once it clicked that consignment services handled a lot of the work up front and also charged less than what I was getting in terms of rates on eBay. I I really started. Um, I went full consignment pilled, if you would say. Like in my you know non Pokemon life, job was getting more hectic. Had had a baby around that time, so just the time that I would normally spend listing, shipping, doing the normal eBay store work just was not there anymore, and so the vault just made sense. So I, starting in early 2025, I sent 100% of my grading submissions to the vault, and continued to work great. I every single 10, every single bin listing, every single auction went fully to the vault. And to this day, I do not have a graded card in my house today. I don't really collect right now because all the capital's cycling through the business, and 100% of my inventory is at the vault. And PSA is able to scale the labor associated with my particular grading business, um, much much better than I can, and they continue to charge less than what eBay would charge if I were to just do all the work myself. So I I saw it not only as a time saver, but a way to 10x a grading business without having to really 10x the work. In instead of me sourcing 20 cards, putting them in a box, sending them off, I could just source 200 cards, put them in a slightly bigger box, put the same label on it, send it off. So really started to expand the kinds of grading plays that I was making. Um, Started to just send more, started to pre-grade less. I would spend hours sometimes looking through a big stack of cards, sorting which ones I'm going to keep on my store, which ones are gonna go to PSA. More and more, we're just going off to PSA because it just made sense, and I didn't have the time to like perfectly pre-grade everything. And there were plenty of submissions that I would send. This is the tried and true, um, discourse with PSA is it's just a random number generator. I would send perfect cards and get eights. I would send cards that were on the edge. They would get tens. If if my shipment was coming back from New Jersey, you knew that you, that your grades were toast. If they came back from Santa Ana, you were fine. Just the my understanding of what PSA really was started to, become a thing. around this time. So, you know, in terms of grading, the kind of foundational plays were what I call the graded edge plays, where if you subscribe to the Pokenomics Patreon with Jake and Dan, which I definitely recommend everyone try it out. They offer access to a service called Graded Edge, where they will do all the information processing, all the math to help you identify good grading plays, which raw singles are a positive EV to grade. You know, they take all the pop report information, all the gem rate data, all the eBay pricing data, and help you understand like which cards have the highest grading premium at any point in time. So as soon as I learned about that, you know, I insta sub to Bookinomics, and to this day still use Graded Edge to help me automate the like front end searching for the right cards for, you know, a lot of my plays. And I don't use Graded Edge for all of my modern plays, but for a lot of plays, Graded Edge just makes sense to at least have as a reference point when you're trying to source cards. So did scaled the modern grading business, started to play around in vintage, you know, understanding like what on TCG Player, like what kinds of cards you could buy for potentially under market, because for some reason people at the time at least didn't really scour TCG Player for like high end vintage cards. Think like crystals, first ed base, gold stars. I would buy a lot of like heavy played, moderately played gold stars off of TCG Player, grade them. They would grade like PSA 4s and 5s, and for what they were priced raw on TCG Player, there was massive upside for, you know, even getting 4s, 5s, and even 6s on certain cards. So started playing around with that, trying to scale that, and then also kind of perfected the PSA 1 grading play, which to me remains kind of one of the weirder parts of the Pokemon market. PSA 1s are some of my highest margin grading plays to this day, and a lot of times they're the most liquid too. Like that, there are days where I sell more gross GMV in PSA 1 slabs than I do in 10s. So, and we can talk about that in a whole nother video that I'm currently thinking about. But so all that to say, 2025 went from, you know, oh, this is a fun little small side card flipping business, to, wow, I just made, you know, more than the median household income in the United States in terms of net profit, and margins continue to double, you know, 10-ish% in 23, 20% in 24, to now a 40+% margin in 2025, just because grading was just so plus EV, and the market went up. I was able to time it well, but also started to understand the game of, you know, harvesting graded premiums. And so that brings us to 2026, which, you know, blew up even more than what, like, I was happy with 2025. Like, if I, you know, grew 5 to 10% a year off of a 2025 base in terms of profit, I would be super happy. Like, I would be able to, you know, take some money out over time, save, collect more, and invest. Like 80 grand a year in profit, even post tax, is like pretty, like that's a big number. But towards the end of 25, I did an analysis of all of my past grading submissions, and to my surprise, but also not really surprised, just after thinking about it, of the 100 PSA subs that I had made, and of the 1 to 3,000 cards that I had sent, not a single submission ever lost money after fees. After all the cards from each sub were sold, not a single one. Like, there were some that were close to flat, but not a single one ever lost money for me. And so that was another kind of wake up moment for me that, hey, the PSA money machine is deeper than you probably know, and you need to figure out where the edge is, because with the vault, and with the way that people love PSA 10s and just PSA cards in general, you can probably milk this machine for more money than you are. So I said, okay, we're gonna full send. Q4 of 2025, I asked myself, like, what is the maximum amount of cards that you can send to PSA in a month? And I, every morning I would prepare a bulk sub. I would, any and all available cards that were in my inventory, I would send, and I would kind of think later. Like, I turned my brain off a little bit. My goal was really to find the limit of, like, okay, where in my, like, pre-grading sourcing phase, like, where am I going, like, too hard? Where am I finding cards that are not working? Like, where is the edge in terms of grading? Because I haven't found it yet, and I don't think I have found it yet, still to this day. And the markets continue to go up, so I'm not a genius by any means. But fast forward 6 months, and those, what is that, 3,000 cards in like 1 to 2 months have been coming back, and it has timed perfectly with another mini boom in Q1, Q2 of 26, and the revenue and the profit kind of speaks for itself. 140K in 6 months, like, that is double what it was all of 2025, and the margins have stayed relatively flat on a much larger bankroll, much larger revenue base. So, like, limit testing was the correct call in late last year, and I now have a bankroll that is enough to where if I generate 15 to 20% margin, like, margins could crash from here, and I could still make a pretty solid profit continuing to grade. And it does so far, like, from how June, July have been going. Like, July is on track to be another record month for me, record margins. So we're going to keep riding this train as long as we can. In terms of PSA, I know that PSA is closed right now. It's not really closed. Like, there are still plenty of ways that you can leverage the regular tier, the express tier, to make a lot of money. So still focusing heavily on leveraging PSA. I have to shift my business a little bit. So I have been ramping up sending a lot of cards to CGC Fanatics through Dan Ketchum Collectibles, which you should definitely go reach out and hit him up if you haven't heard of that service already. And thinking about ways that I can sustain the grading operation with, a zero added to everything in terms of bankroll cards that are in my inventory, the size of my PSA vault, any and everything like that. So to kind of land the plane in terms of how my business has evolved. We went from, you know, normal start dealing in raw, and grading has really just kind of captured all of my wallet share, at least for the time being, and it has paid off in spades. And now I'm at a point where I can kind of step back and look at, okay, where should I send the next bankroll, the next turn of inventory? Like where does that go now that I have a much bigger cash flow to work with? So last page is just like what I would consider my current business model today, like what I'm focused on, like where I feel like I'm continuing to add value to build the business. So as I've been saying for this whole video, my business exists today to harvest the giant grading premiums that exist in Pokemon, One Piece, and other TCGs. Like it's not just Pokemon at this point. It's like all graded card games have grading premiums that I feel are much higher than they should be, given how easy it is to go capture those premiums relative to their raw price. And so I'm gonna wake up and do everything I can every day to turn those grading premiums into profit for me. So buy, grade, sell, repeat. That's a lot of people's business models, and it's worked. And I'm going to continue to ride that wave until it doesn't work, and then we will see where we go from there. But I don't think that it's anytime soon. And even if you attribute most of the grading premium bubble that we're seeing, if you want to use the word bubble to this boom, I would argue that their grading premiums did exist prior to 2022, prior to the 2020 boom. Like grading was a thing, and the premiums were not as crazy as they are now. Like you can't 10x your money on grading a PSA 10 in 4 months, but you could still build a business that generated some amount of margin with less turnover, but you were still able to churn and burn in certain plays, certain cards to harvest great grading premium prior to the boom. And so it is my thesis that grading premiums will continue to exist for the foreseeable future. Maybe not to the level that they are, but to a level that businesses can go capture them. And I'm going to do everything that I can to be one of those businesses that executes to capture grading premium at scale. It is scalable because of all the consignment services, all of the features that PSA, CGC, and other companies have made to allow mass grading without a lot of labor from me, and the margins are still really high. And I know that everyone grades for the most part, and not everyone, but the vast majority of serious businesses in the Pokemon space grade and grade at scale like me. So like this is not a big brain genius business idea. This is just responding to the market and getting as much money out of it as I can while I can. So like thinking about long term, what what is my confidence that, this will continue and that like I have a competitive advantage. And so I think the answer to that, at least right now, is, you know, my experience sourcing cards is now to a point where I have a pretty good understanding of where to find new grading plays relatively quickly, where like how to skip the good plays to find the great plays, and then looking at a card, looking at what that card sells for on eBay or on TCG Player, and quickly being able to understand whether that price means that it is worth buying to grade. Like that's just something that that comes with grading thousands and thousands of cards a year. Um, so I think I am better at that than a lot of people, and that's what's allowing me to make the money that I am today. Another piece of it is understanding how to sell, how to leverage the PSA vault. Um, you know, I haven't even talked about the whole PSA offer system, which is a whole nother rabbit hole, super interesting part of the market structure of collectibles. Um, and so we can talk about that in another video, but like understanding how to leverage, abuse, whatever word you want to put to it, the whole PSA offer system to send the right cards for ultimately for a GameStop power pack, some sort of repack company to then overpay for. Um, Understanding like what cards to auction, what cards to bin, like that's all inherent knowledge that a, a new entrant in integrating doesn't immediately know. And then ultimately, I do think having a lot of capital in this space is a competitive advantage. Like I can allocate capital now to higher risk things in addition to my core business. Like where you find a play that you think works and you buy one or two cards, I buy 10, 20, 30 of those cards to maximize, when I hit big. And I understand how to limit my risks in other areas. But I do think that being able to cycle, $500,000 in bankroll a year is a skill that not everyone can e- easily copy. So even though it's very easy to get into grading, I think it's harder to grade at a very high level at very high margins for a very long period of time, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm enjoying it, and hopefully this plus hopefully potential new revenue streams, new parts of my future business will allow me to go full time with it someday. But if you've made it this far, thank you very much for listening to my late night rambles about cards. Please like and subscribe, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Cheers.